This episode is sponsored by my new book, It's Not You, It's the Algorithm. If your days feel hijacked by pings, posts, and endless tabs, this book will help you reset your attention and lead with clarity again. You'll learn how to think smarter, slow down without falling behind, and make space for what actually matters. No fluff, no finger wagging, just real tools for modern professionals who want their focus back. Find it on Amazon or wherever you buy books, and take the first step towards your own algorithm reset.
This is the Player Position Podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, MaryLou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. MaryLou Kaiser here. Welcome to today's solo episode of the Play Your Position podcast. Today, I want to provide some context for what I'm going to talk about. What's on my mind these days is what's on a lot of people's minds. The current tech shifts we're going through with the rapid adoption and proliferation of AI, as well as geopolitical kinds of things, which I tend to stay away from on this show because this show is not about politics. There are lots of people in the podcasting space that do an amazing job of looking at that. However, we do not exist in isolation. So all the forces that are at play at once are impacting us. That said, let me set the stage for today's conversation. I have been thinking a lot about this year because I wrote my book, It's Not You, It's the Algorithm, and that project alone had me immersed in real-time conversations people all over the internet were having about these changes that we're going through. Now, to step back in time, I, in a different life, was a high school English teacher, and one of the units that my juniors went through each year was about the Salem Witch Trials in Salem, Massachusetts during the mid to late 1600s. Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, was a central piece of that unit. In fact, it was the literature that we used to dive into what happens during times of massive change, which often leads to mass hysteria. And even though we're not seeing mass hysteria the way it was presented to us through the Crucible and also in historical texts, we are experiencing, to a degree, that kind of behavior because we are experiencing massive change, economic change, climate change, political change. There's all these changes going on at once. And the bottom line is we humans are not equipped to handle so much at once. We're just not. That said, our reality is things are changing at a rapid pace. And so the question becomes, what can we do as leaders to guide ourselves through this and also the people in our lives and our organizations? What does the Salem Witch Trials have to do with what I'm talking about? Well, in 1692, there was a judge in Massachusetts. He was actually the governor of the Massachusetts colony at that time, Governor Sir William Phipps. In 1692, it was October of 1692, he put an end to the prosecutions and released the people who had been accused of being witches after his own wife was questioned for witchcraft. In other words, the guy said, enough. This is stopping now. And that's the bridge to what I want to talk about today as it pertains to being a leader, again, of your own life, and also of others, because you would not be listening to this podcast if you weren't leading others in some capacity. Some of you are leading actual businesses. Some of you are leading families. Some of you are leading both. Ultimately, each one of us is leading ourselves. And effective leadership requires being able to step back, assess the bigger picture, and ultimately draw a boundary or a line. And that's what Governor Sir William Phipps did. The hysteria, the accusations, the division was at a point of just ridiculousness. And that's one of the themes in my book, It's Not You, It's the Algorithm, that we still have agency despite what feels overwhelming when you open up your phone, you open up an app, and you see more headlines about either this dystopia that is emerging because of AI or people rallying around it as the solution to everything. And I've been alive and around long enough to know that the pendulum tends to settle somewhere in between those two poles, that it's not one or the other. It's really both. I am sensing that we are reaching that point in human history when people are beginning to either feel the need to say enough, have declared it for themselves, until we have a leader on a large scale who puts an end to this. We are going to continue to be mired down to a degree by, again, the division, the finger pointing, calling out AI, blaming each other. And guys, this doesn't get us anywhere. This actually drives us further down into the ground. I propose what we need to be doing more of is looking at first ourselves and our own habits. This is hard for me. I'm going to tell you, I recently had an experience where I left my phone in my friend's car after I was dropped off at the Salt Lake City airport. I didn't realize that had happened until I was in the TSA pre-line, and I was searching for my phone because my boarding pass was on it. I couldn't find it. I looked everywhere, my pockets, my backpack, my purse, nowhere. So I immediately panicked, anxiety through the roof. I was physically sweating. I was close to tears. Then I went meta on myself and I said, all right, let's walk back. You probably left it at curbside, because how many of us are always holding our phones? We put it down on a counter, get distracted because we're engaging with people or we're looking for something else in our bag, and we walk away without the phone. So I thought that must be where it is. And it was not. I looked around the ground. I retraced my steps. I had literally 15 minutes before my plane was going to board, and I still hadn't gotten through TSA. So I talked myself down from the ledge. I said, you know what? There's two possible outcomes here. One, your friend has your phone. Two, you lost your phone and you're going to have to go from here. Now, the first option was a lot more comforting. The second option, I struggled not to think about what it would mean not to have my phone. Yes, much of my data is backed up into the cloud. I have an iPhone. I have backup. However, I started thinking about the stuff that might not transfer over. And then I started thinking about, why am I so attached to those things? Right? Deep breath. Here was another big aha moment from this little situation. I have memorized 5 phone numbers. That's it. That's it. I know 5 numbers by heart. I know my own. I know my ex-husband. I know my 2 children. And I know the landline to the house I live in. Yes, some of us still have landlines. I don't know anybody else's, including my friend who dropped me off at the airport. Thankfully, there was a courtesy phone in right near my gate. And I called my son. Thankfully, he picked up, even though the number was strange coming from Salt Lake City. I explained what was going on. We came up with a plan. He gave me some resources. I had my laptop. Meanwhile, my flight is boarding. I don't have time in the way that I might if I had had an extra half an hour to log on to my laptop, find some websites, look for numbers. So I am scrambling as I'm getting on the plane, taking my seat. I was able to find there's a website that says locate my iPhone or something like that. Well, here's the interesting thing. When I got on there and put my number in, it was showing my iPad, which was back in New York because I didn't bring it on that trip. It was also showing my 2 old iPhones that I never turned in, I kept. But it wasn't showing my current phone. So I'm thinking, okay, where is my phone? The flight attendants come on the PA, you got to close everything down. I, again, was panicking. Thankfully, I have enough courage to talk to strangers. And the man in the aisle seat, I was in the window, I looked at him and I explained what was going on. I said, I lost my phone. I was fighting back tears. I asked if I could use his. Would it be all right if I texted my son? He was so generous and kind. Throughout the entire flight, there was communications going back and forth. So he kept handing his phone to me and I was texting back, and one thing led to another. The other piece to this story is I have a ride service that I use and I don't know that number, and we communicate via the phone. I needed to let them know that I didn't have mine, so there was no way to let them know that I had retrieved my bags and where are you going to pick me up and all this kind of stuff. So I had to involve my best friend, who happens to live in California, but her brother lives in the same town that I do, and he was actually the one that introduced me to this limousine company. Anyway, long story short, we were able, through creativity and ingenuity and the kindness of strangers, to get all the pieces in place. And about halfway through the flight, Gino, who was my seatmate, handed me the phone and said, your friend found your phone in his car. And so I completely relaxed at that point and settled in. And listen, it was interesting to be on a 4-hour flight without my phone, because I noticed myself, my body, looking for it, because I'm so used to going in there and looking at photos, writing a memo. Yes, scrolling. Yes, I scroll, and I'm aware of that, and I'm working on it, which is part of why I wrote the book. So all of this said, I tell you this story. I want to bring it in for a landing here. I tell you this story because at the end of the day, we are living in a world that is heavily dependent currently on devices, on systems, on apps, for communication, for creativity, for news and staying up on things. My argument is there's a lot that has been developed that is extraneous, that is getting in the way, that is stealing. We are allowing ourselves to be sucked into 45 minutes here, an hour there, even 15 minutes here, where our device becomes the most important thing in our life. Not the people we're with, not the place we are, but what's on the device. I'm not alone in believing that this is not exactly what life is about. So what can we do moving forward? What can we do to begin building something different where we are more present and we can still engage with the things that give us joy or allow us to build connections without losing ourselves and without surrendering our agency and allowing the algorithm to dictate what we believe is true what kinds of things we should buy, where we need to live, all that kind of stuff. And this kind of influence isn't new. It just is showing up at scale in a much more insidious fashion. So as leaders, again, of our lives, and that's where it starts, becoming more aware of how much time we devote to scrolling, to habitually picking up the phone to see, did anybody text me? And then if they did, that decision of, is this urgent? Do I need to open up the text thread and answer everybody? How much of my life do I want to give to the phone? I ask myself that question almost every day now. And as part of my mission moving forward with my book at the center of what I'm doing, I'm spending time studying what people are saying about particularly AI. And this connects back to the hysteria that we experienced as a nation in the 1600s. When there is a massive economic shift, people turn against each other. That is historically been proven. Right now, we are living through a massive economic shift. It is beyond our individual ability to make sense of it. It feels enormous. It feels overwhelming. And I argue that we can develop skills to navigate it with more precision and more agency. I'm going to read something from my journal that I wrote this morning, and I'm going to preface it by saying that it might be hard for some listeners to hear this. I was writing it to the collective comments that I've been seeing under really thoughtful articles about what's going on with AI. And also, I'm writing it to myself because sometimes I need to hold myself accountable. I need to I need to punch myself. I need to throat punch myself and say, wake up, MaryLou. All right. Don't get so swept up into the drama because it's not true. All right. So here's the excerpt from my morning pages, which I do every single day in my journal, write by hand, 15, 20 minutes, blank page, pen. It's an amazing practice. And you've heard me and others on this show over the years talk about how powerful it is to engage with yourself on paper, raw, unedited, unfiltered, just as a way of processing all the stuff that goes on in our heads. So here's what I wrote, and it's in response to the comments that I'm seeing about particularly AI and creativity and art. Frankly, all the whining and complaining I see in comments online is beyond tiresome. I get that change sucks and life's not fair. When did people get it in their heads that everyone deserves everything? Because that's the attitude flowing in the undercurrent of the comments I see. Boo-hoo, wah-wah. Sometimes life fucking sucks. Things fall apart. People leave. Hearts break. Get the fuck over yourself and move on. Whining and crying about how shitty the world is only makes you look weak. How about proposing some solutions? Or better yet, how about getting off your fucking device and go out and care for someone else? An old person, a child, someone who is vulnerable. The extent of selfishness and poor me is beyond. Wake the fuck up and serve. Yes, I say these words to myself to remind me that that is why I'm here. That's why all of us are here ultimately, is to serve, not just our own needs, our own desires, our own wants. Those are important. And believe me, I put time into that. I have to come first, because if I don't take care of me first, nothing happens. Okay? And, or but, either way, and or but, service to others, servant leadership, that's where things happen. When you can rise above the noise and the commotion and the finger pointing and the attacking, and look in the mirror and say, how am I contributing to this, and what do I want to do differently? And I argue that service is where it begins. Serving someone that cannot serve you back. That's the ultimate test, isn't it? Not because you're going to gain something, although you will feel good, but you can't go into it for that. It really needs to be altruistic. And that, listen team, that is hard, because we are selfish by nature. That's the tension we're all riding all the time. That tension between, I need to take care of me and put me first, and it's all about me, and it's not about me at all. I've got to serve others. Within every conversation I've had on this show since I launched it in 2014, that tension has been embedded in what I've talked about with each person who has sat down with me and shared their leadership journey. Leadership ultimately is about that tension between the vision a leader has for themselves, their organization, their art, their dream, and empowering the people around them through service to achieve something that all benefit from. So will we see a Governor Phipps in our lifetime? I like to think so. I like to think it starts with who looks back at you in the mirror every morning, if you have the courage to actually look at yourself in the mirror. And I'm not going to go into another story right now, but there was a time in my life when I couldn't look at myself in the mirror, when I was in a really dark place and I wasn't being honest with myself, and I was blaming and finger pointing and not doing the work that leaders have to do if we truly want to see our visions come to fruition. So with that, team, I'm going to leave you for today. Thank you, as always, for being on this ride with me. Leadership and personal agency and building something better are all worthwhile pursuits. They're absolutely rewarding beyond any pile of cash or McMansion or sports car. That's what this is about. And I know in my heart that you work on that too. Extending gratitude and love to everyone, wishing you an amazing week. Until next time, team, remember, it is always a great day to get out there and play your position. This is MaryLou Kaiser. We'll catch you next time. The Play Your Position podcast is produced by the fantastic Daniel Ramiros, aka Dr. Podcasts. Interested in your own algorithm reset? Visit MaryLouKaiser.com for the book, the toolkit, and ways to work with me. Until next time, remember, it's always a great day to get out there to play your position and live like you mean it.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.